They thought I was weak because I always gave in to my little sister. They were wrong. I was just waiting for the right moment to show them who Madison really was. My name is Madison, and for 28 years I've been the family ATM, the responsible one. The one who understands when my 22-year-old sister Sophia gets everything handed to her on a silver platter while I work 2 jobs to pay for her college tuition. But that was before my wedding day, before she showed her true colors in front of 93 guests, before I realized that sometimes the only way to teach someone the value of money is to take it away. Let me start from the beginning, because this story isn't just about one catastrophic day. It's about a lifetime of being the family's sacrificial lamb. When our dad died 6 years ago, Mom went into what I can only describe as protective overdrive with Sophia. "She's still processing the grief," Mom would say whenever Sophia threw a tantrum about not getting the latest iPhone or designer purse. "She needs stability right now." Somehow, that stability always came out of my paycheck. It started small. $100 here for textbooks Sophia forgot to buy. $300 there for a spring break trip because all her friends are going. But then came the big asks, her college tuition at State University, $43,000 a year. Her off-campus apartment, $1,800 a month plus utilities, requiring a co-signer because Miss Princess had 0 credit history and no job. Guess who became that co-signer? Guess who's been covering the rent when Sophia spent her part-time job money on clothes and nights out instead? You're looking at her. The thing about being the reliable daughter is that everyone expects you to keep being reliable. When I got engaged to David last year, Mom's first concern wasn't about my happiness or wedding planning. It was about how I'd still be there for Sophia, as if getting married meant I was abandoning my sisterly duties as a human ATM. "Madison, you know how much your support means to Sophia," Mom said when I announced my engagement. "I hope marriage won't change how close you two are." Close. That's what she called our relationship, where I paid bills and Sophia took credit for everything good in her life. But I kept my mouth shut. I always kept my mouth shut. Because that's what good daughters do, right? That's what responsible sisters do. They sacrifice their own financial goals, their own dreams, their own peace of mind to keep the family happy. David knew about the money situation. He'd watched me stress over Sophia's expenses for the 2 years we'd been dating. "You don't owe her your entire paycheck," he'd say gently, usually while I was calculating how much overtime I needed to work to cover her latest crisis. "She's an adult." But try explaining that to a mother who sees her youngest daughter as eternally fragile, eternally deserving, eternally in need of rescue. Try explaining that to a sister who's learned that tears and manipulation work better than responsibility and hard work. The warning signs were there in the months leading up to my wedding. Sophia's attitude shifted the moment I started planning. Suddenly, every conversation about centerpieces or dress fittings became about how some people get to have fairy tale weddings while others struggle just to get by. Never mind that her struggle consisted of choosing between Starbucks and the campus coffee shop. "I just think it's unfair that Madison gets this perfect wedding while I can't even afford a decent dress for homecoming," she complained to Mom one afternoon when I was showing off my wedding dress after the final fitting. "Well, honey, maybe Madison can help with that dress," Mom suggested, shooting me a meaningful look. $250 later, Sophia had her homecoming dress, a designer piece that cost more than most people's monthly grocery bill. She wore it once. The passive-aggressive comments escalated as the wedding date approached. Sophia would walk through the house sighing dramatically whenever wedding supplies arrived. She'd make comments about how lucky I was to have found someone who could provide for both of us, as if David was inheriting some kind of financial obligation to support her too. "I just hope marriage doesn't change Madison," she told our aunt at my bridal shower. "Some people get married and forget about their family responsibilities." Family responsibilities, as if paying for her lifestyle was written in my DNA. But I bit my tongue. I smiled. I kept writing checks, because I genuinely believed that once she graduated college, once she started her career, once she grew up a little more, things would change. She'd appreciate what I'd done for her. She'd become independent. She'd maybe even pay me back. I was such an idiot. The night before my wedding, I couldn't sleep. Not because of pre-wedding jitters, but because I was lying in bed calculating numbers. By my rough estimate, I'd spent over $67,000 on Sophia in the past 3 years. Tuition, rent, groceries, clothes, entertainment, emergency room visits from her anxiety attacks that somehow only happened when she needed money, car insurance, phone bills, spring break trips, textbooks she never opened. $67,000. That was more than some people's annual salary. That was a down payment on a house. That was David's and my entire wedding budget. And what did I have to show for it? A sister who resented me for having a wedding day, and a mother who expected me to keep being the family bank account even after I said I do. I should have seen what was coming. The signs were neon bright, but I was so focused on making sure my wedding day was perfect, so determined to have one day that was about me and David and our love story, that I ignored the storm clouds gathering in my own family. My wedding day started like a fairy tale. The venue was everything I'd dreamed of since I was little. A historic mansion with gardens that looked like something out of a romance novel. The weather was perfect, 72 degrees with a gentle breeze that made my veil flutter just right. My bridesmaids looked stunning. David looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, and for the first few hours, I actually believed I was going to get my happy ending. The ceremony was flawless. I walked down that aisle feeling like the luckiest woman alive. David's eyes filled with tears when he saw me, and when we said our vows, I forgot about every stress, every financial worry, every family drama that had led to this moment. For 37 minutes, I was just a bride marrying the love of her life. It was during the reception that everything went to hell. The cocktail hour had gone smoothly. Guests were mingling. The photographer was getting those perfect golden hour shots, and I was finally starting to relax. David and I were making our rounds, thanking people for coming, when I noticed Sophia in the corner looking off. She'd been drinking. Not unusual for a wedding, but there was something different about her posture, her expression. She was standing with Mom, gesturing animatedly, and I could see Mom's face getting more and more concerned. "Maybe I should go check on them," I murmured to David. "Let your mom handle it," he said, squeezing my hand. "This is your day. Don't let anything steal your joy." If only I'd listened to him. The cake cutting was supposed to be the highlight of the reception. David and I had chosen this gorgeous 3-tier masterpiece with cascading sugar flowers that matched my bouquet exactly. It had cost $800, which seemed insane at the time, but it was my wedding cake. It was supposed to be perfect. I was laughing, holding the knife with David's hand over mine, when I heard the click of heels behind me. Fast, angry clicks that made something in my stomach twist with dread. "Madison!" I turned around just in time to see Sophia storming toward me, a champagne flute in her hand and fury in her eyes. Before I could even process what was happening, she hurled the contents of that glass directly at my dress. Champagne. Ice-cold champagne soaked through the bodice of my $1,400 wedding dress, leaving a spreading stain across the delicate lace that had taken me 8 months to pay off. The entire reception went silent. 93 guests stopped mid-conversation, forks frozen halfway to their mouths, as my little sister stood there shaking with rage. But she wasn't done. Before anyone could react, before David could step between us, before I could even find words, Sophia shoved past me and drove both hands into my wedding cake. The beautiful 3-tier masterpiece collapsed. Sugar flowers scattered across the floor like confetti from hell. Fondant and buttercream exploded across the table, splattering the nearest guests and creating a disaster that looked like a food fight had erupted in the middle of my fairy tale. And then she screamed. At the top of her lungs, with every guest watching, with the photographer capturing every horrible second, my sister screamed, "This is what you get for acting like you're better than everyone else!" The silence that followed was deafening. I stood there, champagne dripping from my hair, cake frosting splattered across my shoes, staring at the sister I'd sacrificed everything for as she painted in front of a room full of people who'd come to celebrate the happiest day of my life. "Sophia!" Mom rushed over, but instead of addressing what had just happened, instead of demanding an explanation or an apology, she wrapped her arms around my sister like she was the victim. "Oh, honey, it's okay," Mom cooed, stroking Sophia's hair while I stood there looking like I'd been hit by a bakery truck. "I know this is hard for you. You just need to let it out. Let it out." Those 3 words broke something inside me that I didn't even know could break. My mother was comforting the person who had just destroyed my wedding reception, telling her it was okay to have a public meltdown because apparently my happiness was less important than Sophia's feelings. I looked around the room. David's family staring in shock, my college friends with their mouths hanging open, my coworkers looking like they wanted to disappear, my bridesmaids frozen in place, not knowing whether to help me or pretend they hadn't witnessed this catastrophe. And in the center of it all, my sister being consoled for ruining my wedding day, while I stood there alone, humiliated and finally, completely done. I didn't say a word. Not one word. I just smiled that practiced smile I'd perfected over 28 years of swallowing my feelings for the sake of family peace, and I walked away. That night, after the last guest had left and we'd arrived at our hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my stained wedding dress, and made a decision that would change everything. David was in the bathroom, probably giving me space to process what had happened, when I pulled out my phone and started making calls. First to the bank, then to the property management company, then to Sophia's college bursar's office. By the time David came out of the bathroom, I'd transferred $15,000 out of the account I'd set up for Sophia's spring semester tuition. I'd frozen the co-signed lease on her apartment, effectively putting her 30 days away from eviction. And I'd scheduled a meeting with a lawyer for the day after we returned from our honeymoon. "What are you doing?" David asked gently, sitting beside me. "What I should have done years ago," I said, my fingers flying across my phone screen as I screenshotted every transaction, every payment, every financial record that proved exactly how much of my life I'd given to someone who thought destroying my wedding was an appropriate way to express her feelings. "Madison..." "No." I looked at him, and for the first time in my adult life, I felt truly calm. "She wants to act like a child? Fine. Children don't get to manage their own money. Children don't get unlimited financial support. Children get consequences." That night, I turned off my phone and didn't turn it back on for 10 days. 10 blissful days of honeymoon where I didn't have to think about Sophia's latest crisis or Mom's latest guilt trip or the family dynamics that had shaped every financial decision I'd made since college. But I knew that back home, the clock was ticking. Sophia would discover that her tuition payment had been reversed. The property management company would notice that her lease was in violation, and at exactly 8:40 a.m. on the Tuesday after we returned, they were all going to get the real news about what happens when you mistake kindness for weakness. The girl who'd paid for everything without complaint was gone. In her place was a woman who'd finally learned that the most expensive lesson you can teach someone is the value of what they've been taking for granted. And some lessons I was about to discover are worth every penny. The first call came at 7:23 a.m. on Tuesday morning, exactly 10 days after my wedding disaster. I was still in bed at our hotel in Maui, watching David sleep peacefully beside me, when my phone started buzzing with a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The second call came at 7:31 a.m. Same unknown number, then 7:45 a.m., then 7:52 a.m. By the fourth missed call, David was awake, squinting at my phone with annoyance. "Who keeps calling?" he mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. "No idea," I said, though my stomach was already starting to twist with anticipation. I had a pretty good idea of what was happening back home, and these early morning calls were probably just the beginning. At exactly 8 a.m. Hawaii time, which meant it was 2 p.m. back home, my phone exploded. Not just the unknown number anymore, but Mom's contact, Sophia's contact, and 3 more numbers I didn't recognize all calling within minutes of each other. "Madison!" David sat up, suddenly alert. What did you do?" I smiled and finally answered Mom's call. "Madison!" Mom's voice was so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "What have you done? Sophia is hysterical. The college called this morning and said her tuition payment was reversed. Her landlord is threatening eviction. How could you do this to your own sister? Good morning to you too, Mom, I said calmly, getting out of bed and walking to the balcony overlooking the ocean. I'm having a wonderful honeymoon, thanks for asking. This isn't a joke. Sophia can't finish her senior year without that tuition money. And her apartment? Madison, they're saying she has 30 days to bring the lease current or they're starting eviction proceedings. That's unfortunate, I said, watching a sea turtle surface near the shore. Maybe she should get a job. A job? Madison? She's a full-time student. When is she supposed to work? I don't know, Mom. When did I work? Oh, right. I worked 2 jobs while going to school so I could pay for my own education and then continue working 2 jobs to pay for hers. The silence on the other end stretched for a long moment. Then Mom's voice came back, smaller now, more pleading. Madison, I know you're upset about what happened at the wedding. Upset? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Mom, she threw champagne at me in front of 93 people and destroyed my wedding cake while screaming that I think I'm better than everyone. Then you comforted her like she was the victim. Upset doesn't begin to cover it. She was having a breakdown. You know how sensitive she is about money and what? And the fact that I've been supporting her for 3 years while she's been treating me like garbage? The fact that she's never once said thank you or shown an ounce of gratitude? The fact that she thought my wedding day was the perfect time to have her little tantrum? I could hear crying in the background. Sophia's voice, high and panicked, saying something about how she was going to lose everything. Madison, please, Mom begged. She's learned her lesson. She knows she was wrong. Can't you just what? Just keep being her personal ATM? Just pretend that what she did was okay because she's sensitive? Just continue enabling a 22-year-old woman who thinks destroying other people's happiness is an acceptable way to express her feelings? She's your sister. And I'm your daughter! The words came out louder than I intended, causing David to look up from where he was now sitting on the edge of the bed, watching me with concern. I'm your daughter too, Mom, but apparently that only matters when you need someone to pay bills. The crying in the background got louder. I heard Sophia's voice, clearer now. Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I'll pay her back. Tell her I didn't mean it. She says she's sorry, Mom relayed, as if I hadn't heard. She's not sorry she did it, I said quietly. She's sorry there are consequences. Madison, I have to go, Mom. David and I are about to have breakfast. Wait, you can't just leave us like this. What are we supposed to do? Figure it out, I said and hung up. David was staring at me when I turned around. Damn, he said softly. Remind me never to get on your bad side. You would never destroy my wedding day and then expect me to keep paying your bills, I said, sitting back down on the bed. That's the difference between you and my family. My phone immediately started ringing again. Mom's number. I declined the call and turned my phone to silent. For the next 2 hours, my phone lit up constantly with missed calls and text messages. I didn't read them. I didn't answer them. David and I had breakfast on the beach, went snorkeling, and pretended my family wasn't having a complete meltdown 3,000 miles away. But at 8:40 a.m. Hawaii time, 2:40 p.m. back home, everything changed. I was floating on my back in the hotel pool when David waded over to me, my phone in his hand. Madison, he said, and something in his voice made me stand up immediately. You need to take this call. The number on the screen was one I recognized. Henderson, Walsh and Associates, the law firm I'd contacted before leaving for my honeymoon. Mrs. Chen? The voice was crisp, professional. This is Jessica Walsh. I have some news about the legal documents we discussed. Go ahead, I said, walking to a quiet corner of the pool area. The papers were served this morning at 8:40 a.m. as requested. Your mother, sister, and both sets of grandparents have been notified that you're formally demanding repayment of all loans and financial support provided over the past 3 years, with interest calculated at the standard rate. The total comes to $73,412. My knees went weak. I'd estimated $67,000, but with interest and a few expenses I'd forgotten about, the real number was even higher. The deadline for response is 30 days from service, Jessica continued. If they choose to dispute the amount, we'll need documentation, which I understand you have compiled. If they cannot provide a payment plan or dispute the charges, we can proceed with asset recovery. Asset recovery? Garnishment of wages, liens on property, standard debt collection procedures. Your mother's house, for instance, could be subject to a lien if the debt remains unpaid. I closed my eyes. Mom's house. The house she'd inherited from Grandma, the one she'd paid off years ago, the one she considered her security blanket. Mrs. Chen, are you there? Yes, I managed. Thank you. Send me the documentation. It's already in your email. Is there anything else you need? No, that's everything. I hung up and stared at my phone. $73,000. In writing, with legal backing. Suddenly, this wasn't just about teaching Sophia a lesson about consequences. This was about potentially destroying my mother's financial security. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Madison, please call me. A lawyer came to the house. We need to talk. Then another from Sophia. I don't understand what's happening. Mom is crying. Please just tell me what you want me to do. And then one from a number I didn't recognize. This is your cousin Beth. I don't know what's going on, but Mom called me crying about lawyers and money. Can you please call me? David sat down beside me on the pool chair. What happened? I told him about the legal papers, the amount, the potential consequences. As I talked, I watched his expression shift from surprise to concern to something that might have been admiration. So you're really doing this, he said finally. I don't know, I admitted. I thought I was just trying to teach them a lesson. I didn't expect it to feel so big. Final. My phone rang again. This time it was Dad's sister, Aunt Carol. Madison, honey, your mother called me in tears. She says you're suing them for money you gave to Sophia voluntarily? Hi, Aunt Carol, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I'm not suing anyone. I'm asking for repayment of loans that were never repaid. But sweetie, that's not how family works. You can't just… How does family work, Aunt Carol? I interrupted. Because from where I'm sitting, family seems to work by one person sacrificing everything while everyone else takes advantage of it. Family seems to work by enabling bad behavior and expecting the responsible person to just keep absorbing the damage. Madison, I know you're hurt about what happened at your wedding. Everyone keeps saying that, I said, standing up and pacing around the pool. I'm hurt about the wedding, as if that's all this is about. As if Sophia's tantrum was just a one-time thing and not the culmination of years of entitlement and disrespect. She's young. She's 22. I was working 2 jobs and supporting myself at 22. I was paying my own rent and buying my own groceries and somehow managing not to destroy other people's major life events. But you've always been more mature. No! The word came out sharper than I intended. No, I haven't always been more mature. I've been forced to be more mature because everyone decided Sophia was too fragile to handle responsibility. Well, guess what? She's about to learn how to handle it real fast. Aunt Carol was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you want, Madison? Really? Do you want the money back, or do you want to hurt them? It was a good question, an important question, and I realized I didn't have a clear answer. I want acknowledgement, I said finally. I want recognition that what I did for Sophia wasn't just expected sisterly duty. I want them to understand that destroying my wedding day because she was jealous was unacceptable, and I want to know that if I ever need help, if I ever have a crisis, they would be there for me the way I've been there for them. And you think threatening to take your mother's house is the way to get that? I think it's the only way they'll take me seriously. After I hung up with Aunt Carol, David and I sat in silence for a long time. The sun was setting over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that should have been romantic and peaceful. Instead, I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the rubble of my family relationships. What are you thinking? David asked finally. I'm thinking that maybe I've gone too far, I admitted. But I'm also thinking that if I back down now, nothing will change. Sophia will learn that she can treat me however she wants, and I'll always forgive her. Mom will learn that she can keep enabling bad behavior without consequences, and I'll go back to being the family ATM who's expected to smile and pay for everything while being treated like garbage. So what's the plan? I looked at my phone, which had been buzzing nonstop with calls and texts for the past hour. Family members, family friends, even some of Sophia's college friends who'd somehow gotten my number and wanted to plead her case. The plan, I said slowly, is to see if they can actually learn from this. If they can acknowledge what they've done and make real changes, then maybe we can work something out. But if they just want to rug sweep this and go back to the way things were, then you're really going to take $73,000 from them? Then I'm going to let the lawyers handle it. That night, I finally read through the text messages that had been piling up all day. They ran the gamut from desperate to angry to manipulative. Mom, please don't do this to us. We're family. Sophia, I know I messed up, but this is ruining my life. I'll never forgive you if you destroy my future. Cousin Beth, your mom is having panic attacks. This is cruel. Sophia again, fine, hate me forever, but don't punish Mom for my mistakes. And then, buried in the middle of dozens of messages, one that made me pause. Sophia, I watched the wedding video that Cousin Mike posted. I look insane. I can't believe I did that to you. I'm so ashamed. It was the first message that sounded like actual remorse instead of just panic about consequences. I showed it to David. What do you think? I think she's 22 and probably never really understood how much you've done for her, he said carefully. I also think she's probably terrified and her first instinct is to say whatever she thinks will fix this. So you think it's not genuine? I think people can be genuinely sorry and still primarily motivated by self-interest. The next morning, I made a decision. I called Jessica Walsh. I want to modify the terms, I told her. Instead of demanding full repayment, I want to offer a payment plan, and I want to add some non-financial conditions. What kind of conditions? Family therapy, all of us, for at least 6 months, and Sophia has to get a job and start contributing to her own expenses. And there have to be written agreements about financial boundaries going forward. And if they refuse, then we proceed with the original plan. I'll draft the amended terms and have them to you by tomorrow. When I hung up, David was looking at me with a small smile. What? I asked. Nothing. I married someone who doesn't give up on family, even when they probably should. Is that good or bad? It's why I love you. The amended legal documents were served on Friday morning. Instead of demanding immediate repayment of $73,000, they offered a structured plan. Sophia would pay back $25,000 over 5 years while working at least part-time throughout college. Mom would contribute $10,000 over 2 years. The remaining $38,000 would be forgiven contingent on completing family therapy and abiding by new financial boundaries. The response came faster than I expected. Mom called that afternoon. Madison, we accept the terms, she said, her voice shaky but relieved. All of them. Sophia found a job at the campus library, and I already called 3 therapists to see who can fit us in. What about Sophia? Is she okay with this? She's scared, Mom admitted. But she knows she messed up. Really messed up. And I think I've been enabling behavior that wasn't good for any of us. It was the closest thing to an acknowledgement I'd ever gotten from my mother. There's one more thing, I said. I need to know that if something happens to me, if David and I ever need help, you'd be there for us the way I've been there for you. Of course we would. No, Mom, not of course. Promise me, because I need to know that this relationship isn't just me giving and everyone else taking. I promise, Madison. I promise. 6 months later, we had our first family dinner since the wedding. Sophia had paid back her first installment and was working 20 hours a week while maintaining her grades. Mom had started therapy individually as well as with us as a family. And for the first time in years, when the check came, Sophia reached for it. I've got this, she said, pulling out her wallet. It was a small gesture. $23 for pizza. But it was the first time in 3 years that my sister had paid for something that benefited me. Thank you, I said, and meant it. As we walked to our cars afterward, Sophia caught my arm. Madison, she said quietly, I know I can't undo what I did at your wedding. I know I can't take back all the years of taking you for granted. But I want you to know that I'm trying to be different. I'm trying to be someone worthy of having you as a sister. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in months, I saw my little sister instead of my financial burden. I love you, Sophia, I said. I always have. But I also love myself enough now to not let anyone treat me badly, even family. I understand, she said, and I'm grateful you didn't give up on us completely. As David and I drove home that night, he reached over and took my hand. Any regrets? He asked. I thought about it, about the months of legal stress and family tension, about the money I'd probably never see again, about the relationships that had been fundamentally changed forever. No, I said finally. No regrets. Some people need to lose everything to learn anything, and sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let them learn. The girl who had silently absorbed years of financial abuse was gone. The woman who had replaced her knew that love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's just enabling. And sometimes the most expensive lesson you can teach someone is exactly what they need to finally grow up. Some prices are worth paying, and some boundaries are worth defending, even when it costs you everything to do it.